Making a video like this is not something that I would usually do, especially after a European final, because I'm not your typical analytics football YouTuber. But last night we witnessed something absolutely historic. Last night we witnessed a destructive performance from Paris Saint-Germain in the final of the UEFA Champions League when they played Inter Milan and eventually defeated them with a scoreline of 5-0. A humiliating performance from Inter Milan, but a performance of a lifetime from Paris Saint-Germain. So with the 2024-25 club football season officially coming to an end, I have decided to make this video reviewing the Champions League final between PSG and Inter Milan and discussing what actually went wrong with Inter Milan's performance last night in their humiliating 5-0 loss to PSG. Now, with Inter Milan losing the final with a scoreline of 5-0, and last night while I was streaming, I just couldn't help but question myself that what has exactly gone wrong for this Inter Milan side, a team that defeated FC Barcelona in the second leg of the semi-finals with a scoreline of 4-3, an epic game of football that was, defeating FC Barcelona and of course overcoming all the odds to reach the final once again, this second final in the last 3 years, and yet Inter Milan somehow end up conceding 5 goals to PSG. So I've listed down a few things that I would like to share with you guys based on last night's game. The first one on the list is of course Inter Milan deciding to wear the yellow colored jersey. Now, as you know, wearing a yellow colored kit at the Allianz Arena at Bayern Munich's home stadium isn't the ideal choice, because throughout these last few years we have seen Borussia Dortmund often get destroyed by Bayern Munich at the Allianz Arena itself. So the moment I saw Inter Milan wear the yellow colored jersey, I was like, okay, hold on, why are they wearing the yellow colored kit? I mean, I get it that they were the away side and it was the rule for them to wear the yellow colored kit, but I just so wished that they wore the home kit of the usual blue and black and blue, whatever you want to call it, not the yellow colored kit. Yellow colored kit at the Allianz Arena is a recipe for disaster, and that is exactly what happened. Now, coming to point number 2. आप लोगों से किसको पता था about the Munich curse? The Munich curse is apparently a curse where a team which has never really won the Champions League or like a major trophy play in the Munich stadium, play in the Allianz Arena, play in Munich itself and go on to win a trophy. In 2012 it happened with Chelsea when Didier Drogba scored that equalizing goal right before the full-time whistle against Bayern Munich at the Allianz Arena itself, tying the match at 1-1, and then Chelsea of course जाके अपनी पहली Champions League trophy जीतती है via penalties. It happened right there at the Munich stadium itself, जहाँ पे कल Champions League final हुआ था. So the same happened with PSG once again. PSG एक ऐसी टीम जिन्होंने पहले कभी Champions League की ट्रॉफी नहीं उठाई थी. Chelsea के साथ भी similarly वही हुआ था 2012 में. They had never won a trophy before, Champions League trophy before. So yeah, I think the Munich curse was pretty much in effect last night. And the third, and in my opinion the most important, and of course in all seriousness wala point in this video, I think, is Inter Milan's current strategy in the transfer market, which I think is not sustainable on a long-term basis for this team. Now, let me explain why. So, Inter Milan's current strategy in the transfer market is not sustainable for long-term success in my opinion. And last night was the perfect example of it. अब Inter Milan एक ऐसी टीम है जो ट्रांसफर मार्केट में जाके ऐसे प्लेयर्स को ढूंढती है, ऐसे प्लेयर्स को खरीदने की कोशिश करती है who are certainly aging, who are plus 30 plus. Obviously we have seen the likes of Çalhanoğlu, Mkhitaryan and Acerbi, who are now mainstays in that Inter starting 11. Of course all 3 of them started yesterday as well, but I think that is something that they shouldn't be looking forward to anymore, because that is not sustainable in terms of long-term success for a team like Inter. Inter एक ऐसी टीम है जो अपने veteran players पे बहुत ही ज़्यादा rely करती है. 37-year-old Acerbi started yesterday's final, and then when you look at the bench, you have a 33-year-old Stefan de Vrij, who I assume is Acerbi's backup, unless you want to count Bisek, who is of course younger. But then again, in the midfield you have someone like Mkhitaryan, जो कि है 36 साल के. He's of 36, and you have an aging Hakan Çalhanoğlu as well. So The midfield was completely non-existent yesterday. ठीक है, even Barella, who I think is 28 at this point, long-term basis पे you cannot really rely on these players. You cannot really rely on these players to perform and deliver for you on a weekly basis. Week in and week out, ये लोग players Serie A में खेल रहे हैं. And of course, when you have a match as big as the final of the UEFA Champions League, I don't really think that you can rely on someone like a Mkhitaryan, who is 36-year-old, for the entire 90 minutes. When you know that you're struggling with him, when you know that your midfield is completely non-existent, तभी जाके बेंच में जाके देखना पड़ेगा कि कितने क्या क्या ऑप्शंस है आपके पास. और बेंच पे इंटर मिलान के पास थे ऑप्शंस जैसे असलानी, ज़िलिंस्की एंड ऑफ कोर्स डेविड फ्रेटेजी. बट ऑफ कोर्स इंजागी, आई डोंट नो, मुझे पता नहीं क्या हुआ. ही डिड नॉट यूज any of them except Aslani, who came on very late. When Inter Milan went 2-0 down, तभी इंजागी को सोचना चाहिए था about the changes. He should have thought about bringing on someone like maybe Fratesi in the midfield, because जैसे कि मैंने कहा कि midfield जो है इंटर मिलान का yesterday कल रात completely non-existent थी. स्ट्रगल कर रही थी बहुत ज्यादा, बॉल तो उन्हें मिल ही नहीं रहा था. इंटर मिलान्स strategy in the transfer market definitely needs to be changed. Now moving on from the midfield to the back line, to the defense, which was an absolute disaster last night for Inter Milan. Defensively, Inter Milan were very, very, very bad last night. Alejandro Bastoni, who is arguably the team's best defender, was exposed throughout the entire night, notably by Desire Doué, who was constantly making those runs behind Bastoni, and he just had no clue what was going on. Other than Bastoni, another player, of course, who struggled in the first half, and I think जिस इस प्लेयर के कारण पहले दो गोल्स कंसीड किए थे इंटर ने at the early stages inside 20 minutes is of course Federico Di Marco, who was playing at the left wing back position. पहला गोल जो था Hakimi, he was the one who was playing him onside, and second goal of course was a deflection that came off Di Marco as well. Desire Doué का पहला गोल था मैच का. So yeah, Bastoni and Di Marco had a game to forget, and I think it's a game that they would be thinking probably for the rest of their careers. I don't know, because for them it was a really bad game, and a lot of Inter's backline relies on these two players. Di Marco, of course, has been so crucial for this side, and Bastoni is the defense general for Inter Milan, if you will. He is the one who is sort of like pulling the strings, if you want to put it that way, because he is the youngster in there. He is the one who commands the defense, as you will. Obviously, you have the likes of Acerbi, who's the veteran. But I think at the end of the day, it's Bastoni around whom that entire defense is established. But Bastoni का ये performance, कल रात का ये performance बहुत ही ज़्यादा disappointing था. He let Desire Doué absolutely bully him throughout the entire 90 minutes. Not 90 minutes. Doué went off before the 90 minutes. But yeah, as long as Doué was on the pitch, I think Bastoni struggled. Honestly, हाफ टाइम में तो ऐसा लग ही रहा था कि भाई अभी हाफ टाइम में अगर इंटर मिलान की जगह बार्सिलोना को उतार दे स्टेडियम पे, फील्ड पे, तो शायद कुछ हो सकता है, तो शायद कमबैक वगैरह हो जाए और मैच थोड़ा बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग हो जाए. एक पॉइंट पे सही पे ऐसा भी लग रहा था कि 2023 का जो फाइनल था इंटर मिलान और मैनचेस्टर सिटी के बीच, वो बहुत ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टिंग लग रहा था. एटलीस्ट हमें रोमेलू लुकाकू का जो मास्टर क्लास परफॉर्मेंस था 2023 साल में, वो तो देखने को मिल गया था. मतलब कुछ तो देखने को मिला था. कल रात तो वो भी देखने को नहीं मिला. और एक और चीज़ जो है, मतलब मेरे ख्याल से, आई थिंक out of the 3 European finals that we witnessed, the Europa League, Conference League and the Champions League, this was by far the worst final. The reason why I say the Europa League final was better than this final is because both United and Tottenham Hotspur played quite bad in that final. Both of those teams were not up to the level of how a European final should be played, and I think that is the reason why the Europa League final was quote-unquote better than the UEFA Champions League final, because this was completely one-sided in favor of PSG, of course. Okay, so अब बात करते हैं कुछ extra points की, which I have noted down here itself. Starting with the fact that, did you know that PSG have now lifted the treble now that they have won the UEFA Champions League? I bet you didn't know that, because nobody gives a fuck about French football. Did you also know that this was Luis Enrique's second treble? The first one, of course, being with FC Barcelona. And उस साल FC Barcelona ने किसको हराया था in the UEFA Champions League? That's right, they defeated PSG in that infamous remontada Of course, Neymar was one of the highlights of that game, and it's funny how life works. It's a complete full circle moment. Well, nothing to be surprised about here because this type of performances are usually in the Italian blood. Back in 2015, Juventus made it to the final of the UEFA Champions League, but unfortunately they lost to FC Barcelona in the final with a scoreline of 3-0. MSN being one of the highlights of that match, of that entire season, of course. And of course, the trio of Messi, Neymar and Suarez helped Luis Enrique lift the treble that season as well. Now, it's interesting what happened 2 seasons later in 2017 when Juventus once again made it to the final of the UEFA Champions League. But that time around, they lost to Real Madrid. It's funny how things work, right? First, they lose to FC Barcelona. Next, they lose to Real Madrid in the 2017 final. Similarly, in 2023, Manchester City won the final of the UEFA Champions League at the expense of Inter Milan. Now, 2 years later, PSG winning their first UEFA Champions League at the expense of Inter Milan. So yeah, like I said, these type of performances usually run in the Italian blood. So similarly, Inter Milan has proved to be the prostitutes for these oil money virgins, and they have proved that any team that has not won the Champions League before can lift the Champions League at the expense of Inter Milan. But of course, I would like to end this video on a much more positive note by congratulating Luis Enrique on this amazing season that he had and everything that he has experienced over these last few years. Of course, in 2015, he won the UEFA Champions League, and his daughter Jana was there with him to celebrate on the pitch. She was there taking photos with Luis Enrique while he was holding the trophy. But unfortunately, in 2019, she passed away. So yeah, if there's one man for whom I am very happy about regarding this PSG victory, it is of course Luis Enrique. So big congratulations to him. The PSG side overall in general feels much more united. In the past, we have seen them sign superstar players including the likes of Messi, Neymar and Mbappe as well. But of course, with that trio, they were not able to reach such heights. They were not able to fulfill those expectations of the fans, and which also led to a lot of fans sort of turning their backs against the club, protesting against their own players, protesting against the club. But now it just feels like one big family. It just feels so much more united. And even after the final had concluded today, we saw the PSG fans unveil that big tifo in honor of Luis Enrique and his daughter Jana. So yeah, the PSG team will be a team to watch out for next season. I have no idea who will defeat this PSG side, and there is a big possibility that this team will only get better. Luis Enrique, once again, big kudos to him, big congratulations to him. And of course, how can I finish the video without mentioning one man, Kylian Mbappe.